4x4, you gotta love it. Some may call this abuse, but we call it normal operating procedure around here. Now, no matter what you call it, service is required today on Tech Garage. Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now, running our four-wheel drive truck off-road around here, well, that's normal business. Whether we're backing down a boat ramp, using it on the farm, towing, or just some good off-roading fun. You know, Brian, people like to call that abuse. I call it severe duty. And when you do that, you're going to have the need for maintenance.
You know, just about any vehicle, the most stressed system on the vehicle is the transmission and drivetrain, especially in a four-wheel drive application where we add a transfer case to the mix. So good professional service, transmission service, is paramount, because this thing has to perform at high speed, low speed, high range, low range, all conditions. So if we want to protect that driving experience and protect our investment in the vehicle, we've got to do this service. Now, it's not terribly hard to do. We're going to get into that in a minute, but this is a complex system.
It really is, you know, and in true Tech Garage fashion, we're going to take you inside the transmission so you can have a look. You know, Brian, there's clutches in there, there's bands in there, and there's a torque converter inside of there that actually makes an immense amount of heat. That's what's breaking down the fluid. So I'll get a demo set up. You get started right here.
Perfect. Well, step one is to drain the old transmission fluid on our Dodge Ram here. Now, the drain pan has no drain plug. So we methodically want to come around the pan, loosen the bolts, tip that front down, and get the fluid draining. Now, as that drains, I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to understand, is there additional wear or burning, anything going on up inside the underbelly of this transmission.
Now, transmissions come in all shapes and sizes, but they all operate basically on the same principle except for one. You may be driving a car with a CVT, continuous variable transmission. I have one right here. This is pretty cool because it's not shifting gears. It's just continuous velocity as it goes through there. But when you're dealing with that, you want to make sure you take some special precautions. There's a special fluid and special maintenance procedures. Other than that, they're all pretty much the same. And I have a cutaway one right here. You can see a clutch pack right here. You have some bands in here, and the fluid's going to do all the work like Brian mentioned. They're complex, but I'll simplify it for you. Right here is a clutch pack. That's what's inside. And the clutch pack's made up of these steel discs and then fiber discs. You can see the fiber here and the steel. And what happens when fluid pressure engages, it squeezes those together, just like a clutch on a manual transmission car. It squeezes it in there and it causes it to drive here. And you're getting actually direct drive coming through your units or the gears you select. The problem with that is the clutches wear out. Fluid starts to wear. You also have a band like this. This band has a friction material on it, and that band wears out as well. That has to hold these clutch packs to achieve different gear ratios. Now you can see a couple of clutches right here. I actually have few. These two right here are totally worn out. This one's actually broken. So what happened is this material starts to come off. That's that stuff Brian may find in the pan when he drops it, and that's what's actually deteriorating the fluid. Here's a nice new clutch right here. You can see the difference in the lines, and it allows it to wear. Steel plate right here. Now, another factor is the valve body. Fluid gets old, it gets varnished. And when it varnishes, this is a shift valve. I can pull out a shift solenoid, and what that does, it engages in here on a shift valve. Now, this little shift valve here has a tight clearance, and if it starts to get varnished up a little bit, it starts sticking. A lot of problems with valve bodies, shift valve sticking, when you don't service the fluid, and it starts to varnish up. Also, if you're ever dealing with the transmission, torque specifications are critical on that one. Another factor, torque converter. Torque converter generates an immense amount of heat. Why? It's multiplying torque. You can see one here. We got it blown apart. You got the impeller, you got the stator, you got the turbine. Well, what's going on, without getting into a whole class on it, it's redirecting fluid. And every time it redirects fluid, the fluid has to hit it, and that creates a lot of heat, and it deteriorates the fluid real rapidly. But that multiplies torque in an automatic transmission. That's why a lot of times you have a cooler. You have a transmission cooler right here. And what happens is your transmission fluid goes through there, and it's running through radiator fluid is in the radiator here, but this is separate. If you ever have a leak in here, you can actually start getting it into the actual coolant itself, and I can show you what that looks like. I put some in here like this, and you shake it up, you may have some coolant that looks like a strawberry milkshake, just like that. You know you have a problem with that. That's why you have to keep it cool. The fluid starts deteriorating, man, it looks like this. This isn't good. I suspect Brian's finding something like this over on the pickup truck.
Whew, John, I wish this was smell-o-vision, not just television. Not only is there a visual difference in the new ATF Plus 4 compared to the old that I caught, it doesn't pass the sniff test. It smells like it's burnt, it smells like rotten eggs. Telltale signs this vehicle was due for service. So we've got the fluid just about completely drained out of the pan here. I've got all the bolts loose. Now, we've got a big catch can here, but if you're doing this in your garage or on the driveway, put a piece of cardboard down. You don't want this slippery tranny fluid on a walking surface. So I'm going to bring the pan down, and you're going to notice a couple magnets. Now, most of today's transmission pans have the magnets down inside, and there is one here on the Dodge as well. I like to add an additional magnet because as it drains, fragments, those metal bands John showed you, they wear over time, and I want to see if there's any shavings, any evidence. Now with the pan down, I'm going to look for kind of any burnishing, any damage to this pan, anything irregular. It looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit it with brake clean during the break. We're going to clean up this flange all the way around. You can use a cookie or a wire brush wheel on a drill, but you got to get this clean and ready for the new gasket. Not hard to do. So we're on our way. When we come back, we'll swap out the transmission filter and get moving on to the transfer case. So stay with us on Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts.
Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by Moog, official steering and suspension of NASCAR. Dustless Blasting, it's the future of surface preparation. Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. And by Advance Auto Parts, let's get you back on the road.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now, before we finish up our transmission service, I wanted to get the transfer case draining underway, so that's working for us. There we go, drain plug is out. I'll set it up here, make sure we're not going to have any spills. Now, what I want you to see up here at the transmission pan is how much cleaner it is. Remember how filthy and dirty that was? It looks brand new. You can see the magnet in the corner, very clean. Brake clean, a little bit of time, a little bit of a cookie around the edge, got that flange really clean. And this is the new gasket. Now, resist the temptation to use RTV or something else here. That's a big no-no. Chief Tech Chase says use the mounting bolts, get the new gasket down over it, grab a shoulder of a thread right there, and it holds it right in place. It actually works really, really well. But before we put the pan back up, we have to reinstall one of the two new filters. Now, this only goes in one way. There's a mounting bolt with an 8mm bolt. Calls for 40 inch-pounds of torque. You got to get that right. You got to honor it. There's also a new cartridge filter up in here. Here's the old one. That called for 80 inch-pounds of torque. We've got that all set. Before I button it up, I like one final visual inspection of the valve body. I like to clean this flange and wipe it down all the way around. Very clean. Transmission dipsticks right here. No obvious damage. I think we're in pretty good shape with this tranny. So I'm going to go ahead and get the filter in, finish this up, and then move back and finish up the transfer case, which, as promised, is a mighty complex system unto itself. And John's going to explain how that works.
The hows and the whys. How does the transfer case work, and why are we servicing it? Well, we happen to have an old transfer case laying around, so we went ahead and separated it. So you can take a look inside. Now the transmission's bolting right up to this side, and then it just transfers its power clean through it. It's actually going through this shaft, and watch this. I can hold this right here and spin it. And what's going on is, this is spinning, and it's actually driving all the way through to the output shaft and driving the rear wheels. Now, if you want to engage it into four-wheel drive, you simply just hit a lever. The fork's going to go ahead and hit this shift mechanism. It's going to kick it over. But the key here is this brass blocker ring. This brass blocker ring allows that gear to get up to speed by actually spinning and wearing a little bit, so those gears will mesh. Now, once those gears mesh, now I drive it. You see the change driving? Well, what's going on now? It's transferring the energy all the way up to the front to my front wheels for four-wheel drive. So why are we servicing it? Well, number one, the brass blocker ring. I'm getting some metal in there every time I engage it. I have a chain slinging around here. Brian said it was complex. Here it is. We also have some bearings. We have some front bearings, some rear bearings. There's a lot going on inside of here, and that lubrication is key. Now, Brian's about got it serviced over there. Let's check in with him.
There we go. You want this bottom plug in the transfer case? Pretty snug. A lot of complexity in there, isn't there? Okay, so when you go to refill it, make sure you understand the type of ATF that's required and the amount. In this case, we checked with MotoLogic, it's 2.2 quarts. Couple ways to go about that because you want the right amount in there. You can pre-measure it in a canister, 2.2-ish quarts, use an old hand pump, go in the old-fashioned way. Mighty Vac has made this a lot easier. If you're doing differentials, transfer cases, transmissions, any type of hydraulic fluid exchange, this is a great tool to have around the shop. It's very simple. Now, a lot of people stress over exactly how much is the right amount. Well, it's good to know the spec, but it's also completely appropriate to pump it till it comes right up to the edge of the filler hole and starts to seep back out across the threads. That's not too much, but it is enough. This makes it so much easier. All right, I'm going to take my time, get this right, get the right amount in our transmission and transfer case service will be all done. Next step, get the truck down, refill the transmission fluid. There's a process to that. You want to do that right, and of course we do that from the top. The right fluid and the right amount. You got to make sure you get this part right. Now we're topping it off with our Castro ATF Plus 4. We check the owner's manual. It requires 6 quarts. That's number 6. John, I think we're looking pretty good up here.
Yeah, and that's key, the right amount of fluid and how much fluid you're using. Now, Brian, once you get that topped off, there's also a procedure you want to go through. You remember that valve body earlier? We want to make sure that the fluid's going all through there. We got Chief Tech Chase in the car. Go ahead, crank it up and let's run it through the gears. Just going to put it in reverse, put it in drive, drop it down in low, then come on back and put it in drive again, park, reverse, and then park it. That's good. Just follow your service manual. That's going to run the fluid all the way through. Make your second check. How's it looking, Brian?
And one more check.
There you go. All right, take another check. And of course, you want to get it hot, get it to temperature.
Looks great.
You're
right there.
On the money. Now make sure you take it on a test drive. Come on back, do a second inspection. We're going to take ours on a test drive, and I'm going to lock this thing into 4-wheel drive, run some of that fluid through that transfer case. That's going to be a lot of fun. But you know what? You don't want to miss it. Make sure you come back because we're bringing back the RSX Resurrection Project. And remember the headers and the exhaust, you don't want to miss this one. You want to hear it run. We'll be right back with more Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts. Wow, our project RSX Resurrection is sounding great. You know, we got that cold air intake on there. We got our DC headers wrapped. We got the MagnaFlow exhaust. Of course, I had to take it for a test drive, and I even nailed it a little bit. Big problem. We got some slippage. Nothing going on the front wheels. We should be smoking those things by now. We either have a clutch issue or we got some kind of hydraulic issue. Brian's going to do some diagnostics, but before he does that, let's just go ahead and dive in. Let's look at what a clutch does and even take a look inside of a manual transmission. The clutch starts right here. You got 3 pieces. You have a pressure plate, you got a clutch disc, and then it goes to the flywheel. And how it works, well, this is pretty cool. You got these fingers located right here. And what happens is when you push on your clutch, the clutch pedal is going to actually increase hydraulic pressure, and it's going to push on here with a throwout bearing. Now these fingers are very difficult to push, and when it does it, it's going to take this pressure plate and it's going to move it back. That disengages the clutch. When you let go, the fingers actually push forward like they are right now, engaging the clutch to the flywheel. Here's the clutch itself. Now the clutch actually goes right between the pressure plate and the flywheel. So what's happening, when it's engaged, everything's turning together. When it's disengaged, the clutch is allowed to slip inside there, and I can actually build it for you. You can see our transmission, I have a cutaway right here. I can put the pressure plate on first, and then I'm going to actually take the clutch, and it's going to spline to the input shaft. So it's part of the input shaft of the transmission. Then what? The flywheel's bolted to the engine. So it's going to go engine speed when it's engaged. When it's not engaged, it's allowed to spin inside of there. Now, RSX, we could have a worn clutch. There could be a problem there because we're slipping. We're not engaging. Now, what engages it is hydraulic fluid. Our RSX uses brake fluid right here and a master cylinder. Now, the master cylinder, it's located right up on the firewall of the car, and this bolts to the pedal. And what happens is you push the pedal, multiply force, comes down to the slave cylinder. The slave cylinder is bolted on there somewhere, and it's going to activate the fork, which is pushing in and out on that pressure plate. Now, check this out. We have a transmission here that's all apart. I told you, the flywheel splines here to the input shaft. So it spins, and what happens is it spins, nothing's going on with the output shaft, because the input shaft has no link to the output shaft. It actually goes down here, and you can follow the power flow. It goes down to a counter shaft, and the counter shaft goes through the whole transmission, and then those gears are splined to each one of the gears as you shift them. I can show you. I actually kick it to the left, kick that one in, spin it, and you get input and you get output. Or you shift into another gear. You're actually going to lock these gears to the output shaft, which gives you drive. Remember the fluid earlier? Just as important to service the manual transmission as well. The blocker rings, all these moving parts, bearings, shift forks, detents, levers, everything needs to be lubricated. Now, Brian's doing an inspection over there, but you know, we got him covered because CarQuest sent us the premium new clutch kit. And that's pretty cool because it comes with the pressure plate, which I highly recommend replacing them both no matter what, because you're already in there and it's a huge job. So we got a pressure plate, we got a clutch. They actually gave us a clutch alignment tool. It even comes with the throttle bearing and an actual pilot bushing, so that's complete. So no matter what he finds, we got him covered. Let's check him out in his diagnostics and see what he come up with.
Okay, well, the first thing we're going to do is a little further diagnostics. Now, I also drove the car this week, and I actually tried to start it a few times in second gear. Normally, if everything's working properly, it should stall, but it didn't, which tells me the clutch is definitely slipping. So we've established that. Now, the cause. So step one, I'm going to replace this slave cylinder, or at least get the old one out. I can tell you down here at the connection on the slave cylinder, I see a little weeping of hydraulic fluid, so we may have a leak there. Now, I don't think that can get into the clutch pack in this application and contaminate it, but that's something to look out for. Once that clutch is contaminated, it's done. You've got to replace it. But in the spirit of Tech Garage, you know, we got to thank our guys over at CarQuest for sending us everything we need. I recommend we go ahead and replace the clutch, pressure plate, and the slave cylinder and really do this thing right. So let me get this old one out. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and leave the hydraulic line attached to the slave cylinder so that it comes up out a lot easier. It's a little less wrestling because down here, frankly, it's hard to reach. Okay, there's the second mounting bolt on the slave cylinder. It's ready. Now, if you look right here, you can see the hydraulic line. Let's backtrack it all the way up to the hydraulic reservoir. That ultimately feeds the slave cylinder. You push in the clutch, you get hydraulic assist, overcomes those forks that John showed you. Well, I'm going to take that line and work backwards here. And all I have to do is break it loose down at a coupling that we can reach real easily here with the cold air intake removed and the battery out, giving ourselves really good access. Let me split this coupling open. So let's remove this whole assembly and work it up out. Now, keep in mind, in this whole hydraulic to mechanical connection, we're really harnessing a little over 200 horsepower with our K20 engine. But John's about to show us over at Bernie's Speed Shop how they connect 4,000 horsepower through the clutch pack. So stay with us on Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts.
Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by Disc Brakes Australia, race-proven technology, Steel Rubber Products, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping, Clamp Tight, the clamp making tool, and by Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back on the road.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. This week's Performance Playbook's all about the drivetrain, getting the power back to the differential. Josh, man, we looked at an automatic transmission, the clutches, the pressure plates. We looked at everything and servicing it. Now, you guys play by a whole different set of rules. How do you guys get 4,000 horsepower back to this differential?
We use a centrifugal clutch with 4 discs and floaters.
And these are the discs right here?
Yes, sir.
How many discs do you use in one run?
We will use a new clutch pack every pass.
No matter what?
No matter what.
Now tell me a little bit about this centrifugal clutch. How does that work?
It essentially applies more pressure as the run progresses in that 5-second period.
And you got to stop, so I mean you're going to have to disengage it as well.
You could essentially stand on the clutch and it would not do anything after it's engaged.
Well, cool. Drew's back in the shop and he's looking at some performance upgrades on some clutches and a manual transmission. Let's join him.
To do the conversion, you got to switch out the pedals, full assembly, clutch pedal, brake pedal. We utilize the factory Z-bar style. It's got the fork and the Z-bar mounted to the frame, hooks into the new pedal assembly. When we did the conversion, it came with the new drive shaft. It's been shortened, new universals, a little bit heavier duty than the factory one. Well, going from the automatic to the manual transmission, of course, now you got to drive the car. The gear ratios changes, drivability changes, the power, the feel, just going through the gears.
Check in next week for another performance playbook here at Bernie's. Now let's head back to the shop for the email question of the week.
John Scott from Tampa emailed us this week. He's got a 97 Camaro LT1, sounds like an awesome car, that's hard to get in on a gear at various speeds, and it's even grinding a little bit. Let's talk about how we help Scott.
Well, Scott, don't go jumping inside your transmission. I know a lot of people think that it's either the synchronizers or the actual gears themselves. It could be. You saw the brass blocker rings earlier and how it shifts, but 9 times out of 10, Brian, it's usually just in the shift linkage. There's some detents and balls in here, and the shift linkage itself, once that becomes loose, it's very difficult to shift it, and they grind all the time.
Yeah, and something else to check is your throwout bearing, but you didn't say you had any squealing, chirping, anything like that, so it's probably okay, but that is something that may need checked.
That is true. You know, your master and slave, we did that today. You got to have pressure on that clutch. Also, another trick for you, Scott, if you put your car in reverse before you go into first gear, you're going to stop that main shaft from spinning. It's going to go in a lot easier.
That's the only way my antique Jeep gets into first gear, so that's good advice.
Now, RSX, man, we got the whole clutch job to do. We got a lot of work in front of us.
Yeah.
You know, the master and slave, that's going to take care of the hydraulic issue, but we got some work cut out for us.
It's going to be a hot rod when we're done, so I am excited. Hey, be sure to find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.
Yeah, and like always, thanks for watching Tech Garage, where we get you back on the road.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida. Founded in 1947, Chipola College is a member institution of the Florida College System, with a current enrollment of over 2,000 students. Chipola offers bachelor's and associate degree programs, as well as college credit and workforce development certificates. Chipola was recently ranked as one of the top 3 community colleges in the United States.